Some of the faces are familiar. I've known them. This is Sumeer Bhasin. I'm right now in Kabul. So Aditya called me last night to moderate this session. I see they're very esteemed members. They have a lot of experience in the area from different angles, and I welcome you all by one, and then we can start the session.
I can't hear anyone.
I'm Krishan, Varma. I was in the Cabinet Secretariat. I retired in 2012 as Special Secretary. I have been associated with a large number of issues, large number of subjects, and dealing with terrorism and international terrorism as well as counter-terrorism over the years. And I have been posted in the valley during some critical times in 93 to 95, and some militancy affected things that I've seen in the Northeast also, where I was in 2008 to 2010. So one has been interested in this subject and have been following it closely from a number of angles, which take right through the theory part of it, as well as the practice, as well as the technical side. Thank you.
Pandit, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, hi, my name is Sushil. I come from Kashmir, though I'm settled in Delhi now for several decades. I am a mass comm professional for a living. I'm an activist for the cause of Kashmiri Hindus for about 10-15 years now. I'm also publisher of a journal on the culture and identity of Kashmir. And I have an interest in security and strategic affairs. I'm a student.
Mr. Khoda, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Kuldeep Khoda, former Director General of Police, J&K. So, heading intelligence for about 5 years from the period of from 2000 to 2007, with a gap of about a year or so in between, and then Director General of Police from 2007 to 2012. That is my job earlier. Later on, I was Chief Vigilance Commissioner also, state of J&K, for about 4 years.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll just make a quick introduction of myself. I have been in Kabul for the last 18 years. I am in the private sector. I'm in business, but like Mr. Pandit said, he's a student of strategic affairs. I am an observer of strategic affairs, and because of the location where I ended up coming for business, but I sort of got involved into about roughly about 8-10 years back into this whole strategic thinking and geopolitics in the region, and I am a participant in various think tanks. I have been on the policy group of the German think tank called FES on the outcomes of Afghanistan post 2014. So I am closely observing the geopolitical situation in the region, and terrorism is not only affecting India, but is affecting the whole region, and it is a cause of concern globally and especially in the region. So I think the challenges and are in a major part of any issue because it affects all aspects of life, and besides security, there is economic impacts, there are other impacts. So I think, and I welcome the panel because you all come from different professions and you've experienced countering terrorism from different ways, whether it's ethnic violence, whether it's national security, or whether it's economic issues. So I would request each one of you to, in whatever order you want, is to give your views as to the points I sent. Is I would refrain from at the outset of politicizing terrorism. I would focus on dealing it as a national security issue, and what challenges India faces, and how India has, through the course of recent history, countered these challenges, and what do you think should be your suggestions and recommendations on how we can, deal with this in a better way? Because history tells us we have sort of not been very successful in, sort of change, still at the receiverism and continue to suffer, and there has been no major, sort of change in the course of terrorism affecting us. So, Pandit, if you can start.
Okay, what we define or call as terror, in my humble opinion, as a very vanilla kind of description about what we face. I believe it should be called what it actually is, and that is jihad. We are facing an implacable enemy with uh, a relentless war unleashed on us. Our problem is we fail to define it as war. Terror seems like something which perhaps looks like hostilities and aggression, but is stopping short of war. In my humble opinion, that is not the case. It is war fought not as a conventional war, but war in the terms of Pakistan, because that's what it suits the enemy. Because they cannot afford the traditional war with us, because they can't sustain the cost and the consequences of such a war, they have imposed a different kind of war on us, which is suitable to them. And hence, we seem to treat it differently. We are always living in fear of escalating it into a war, whereas the fact is we are already in the middle of a war. So we need to define this clearly and honestly for what it is. So what GHQ Pakistan has unleashed on us is most definitely a war. The strategy seems, which they have themselves mentioned quite often, 1,000 bleeding cuts to bleed us white and dead. That doctrine pretty much defines the kind of war it is on us. They may have alibis. Kashmir is an alibi. Kashmir is at best a theater. Kashmir is probably the lowest hung fruit, which is why they've gone for it first. But let's not mistake that the war is against India, and when opportunity presented itself, they did not hesitate in using Punjab as the first theater for this kind of a war. So in late 70s, when it barely began, and early 80s, and right through the 80s, it was Punjab where they imposed such a war on us. And after the second half of 80s and early 90s, we've seen it fully blown in Kashmir. So that's how I would like to believe that the objectives of Pakistan are not confined only to Kashmir. If there was any doubt about it, I would like to mention two specific pieces of evidence. One, in an interview when Musharraf was asked by a journalist as to whether if Kashmir is resolved, there would be peace between India and Pakistan, he very candidly, which is his hallmark very often, said that no such hope, because so long as India remains in its present size and potential, it will always be a threat to Pakistan. And for Pakistan to feel secure and comfortable, India will have to be cut down to the right size. And hence, we can expect a relentless war from Pakistan till such time it feels comfortable with our size. Another issue is that even while they chose Punjab and Kashmir as theaters in 80s and 90s respectively, They expanded the ambit to Mumbai. They killed one of our mathematicians in Bangalore in an attack on Indian Institute of Science, where a conference was being held. They have attacked India in Jaipur, in Delhi, in our parliament, in Ayodhya, at Akshardham in Gujarat. You name a state that has been left out, it is difficult to find. At Bodh Gaya, so all targets in India are a fair game, and they have been infiltrating through different routes, Nepal, Bangladesh, through our coastal routes, and of course through our western borders. So their target is India. It is incidental that sometimes it is Punjab or Mumbai or Bangalore, and most often it is Kashmir because that's where they find it most convenient and easy to attack us. Do we recognize it for what it is? I'm afraid even if there is an acknowledgement of this in different instruments of the state, our state policy has never acknowledged it for what it is. For example, the very first time in the last 4 decades, our MEA used the word jihad in its communique immediately after the Balakot strikes. Indian state has fought shy of using the word jihad and jihadis in the last 4 decades prior to this communique. Likewise, Indian state has never ever avoided paying obeisance in terms of rituals, whether it is on the national days that Pakistan celebrates or various other occasions. It has never designated Pakistan as an enemy state. Whereas Pakistan has never had any hesitation in branding India in its official documents, in its security doctrine as an enemy state. In their discourse, where Pakistan has defined India as the only enemy they have besides, of course, Israel, which is the collective enemy of Ummah. So we have refrained from defining Pakistan as the source of aggression because there is an abiding enmity emanating from Pakistan. Which is why, in terms of responding to such kind of aggression and war, we've been found wanting. Our counter-terror policy, wherever it has emanated from, especially in case of Kashmir, has been about managing Kashmir and not crushing terror, crushing separatism. So, different limbs of the state have worked not apparently to one set of specific common objectives. While our security forces are busy neutralizing terror, our government creates policy structures that nourish the same terror and the establishment that foments terror. In the state of Jammu and Kashmir, we have had a government which has been cushioning terror and those who've been supporting terror openly. Our Ministry of Home Affairs has been sustaining the fountainhead of terror and the biggest justification of terror in Kashmir, called the Hurriyat Conference, and sundry other leaders who are defined as separatists. We have even waved away the prosecution of genociders and mass murderers as some kind of a concession to these players. People like Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate, who are self-confessed mass murderers, abductors, rapists, genociders, who've burnt homes, who've chased away a minority, who have dozens of FIRs pending against them. None of that FIR has been followed up through proper prosecution, evidence, conviction, and punishment. None, not even one person in the state for thousands of crimes has ever been punished. even as an exception. So while our state at the political level indulges these um, organizations and terrorists with placatory gestures, trying to win them over, the onerous task of liquidating uh, the violent jihadists is on the army, and there as well. I must add security forces, including CRPF and BSF and the Jammu Kashmir Police Special Operation Groups and all, work in tandem, but with their hand tied behind the back. There are unilateral ceasefires in the name of Ramzan. There is mass pardon to miscreants who are overground workers of the same terror. There are, of course, government policies which go and compensate families of the fallen terrorists. And then there is mortification of seeing mass frenzied funerals for fallen terrorists who are given a hero's send off, given a martyr's halo, and create a massive spectacle which become almost like walk-in interviews for fresh recruits. So state and its security forces, if you wanted to see an example of working at cross purposes, here it is. Our intelligence network, I'm sure people in the panel are better placed to talk about intelligence services contributing to this effort. I believe even there, very often you find people working at cross purposes. I see in mass media our intelligence agencies screaming themselves hoarse that please stop these mass funerals because they are, heaven sent opportunities for recruiting new terrorists, fresh terrorists. But the executive doesn't listen. And these are going on for several years now, especially in the last 4.5, 5 years. When Masarat Alam like dreaded ringleaders are released arbitrarily to a political decision making, I wonder where the security apparatus and the intelligence services and their inputs are factored in. So we have become a laughing stock of a state which is shooting its own feet while waging a grim battle of its survival, of life and death in several theaters, including Kashmir. In Punjab, luckily, we had more resolute leadership and we crushed the terror challenge there. But in Kashmir, we seem to be hurtling down the tube, plummeting new depths, and have perhaps rendered the situation worse than ever before. With no political objective of reversing a genocide, with no political objective of crushing the terror and terror sympathizers and giving them a decisive defeat. Instead, we are looking for negotiations, we are looking for give and take. We keep our doors open and keep sending our interlocutors in order to placate and find a middle ground when the enemy refuses to talk because they think there is nothing to talk. I'll rest my case. Perhaps I have exceeded my time. I'm sorry, Sumeer, for doing so. Later, perhaps we can engage in more details. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Pandit. I think we will have a little discussion on your issues later. Khoda and the others have spoken. One point I would like to make is that uh, uh, this whole issue of jihad, the origin, we all know where it started. It started with the Afghan war and the recent killing in Christchurch. Terrorism, we cannot make, we have to define, although there is no global acceptance of a definition on terrorism, but it is a very sensitive issue to purely related to a specific community or to jihad. An act of terrorism has to be defined neutral to the religious context. I can understand Pakistan politicizes that because they're a Muslim majority country, and we all know that the terror factories or the madrasas were started with the Afghan jihad at the behest of the CIA. So and later on the same terrorists were pushed onto Kashmir. But I understand your sentiments, but I think that is a very
I can't hear
sensitive and
you anymore.
tricky issue. Uh, I would request Mr. Khoda to, give it, say what he wants to in the next 10 minutes,
I
please.
lost.
Mr. Khoda, you have to switch on your mic.
I have to switch off my mic.
Okay, can
We'll
you hear
all
me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Please go ahead, please.
I'm audible.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah,
the
please
voice
go
is
ahead.
clear. No echo, na?
It's very clear. Please go ahead. Thank you.
All
Please
right,
go ahead.
thank you. Mr. Sushil Pandit has already elaborated the various aspects of terrorism and the way it has grown, including the role of the state, the political dispensation, and the executive as well. I will not further elaborate on that except when required to some extent. But let me carry it forward in a way that to keep focus on the policy, our response rather, to the terror which has been going on in J&K for the last 30 years. It has been preceded by terror in Punjab also. But when we discuss about terror in Kashmir, because primarily Pakistan is now focused on terror in Kashmir, of course, the incidents have taken place in other states also. Mumbai being one of the biggest one, the parliament attack also being another one, and Akshardham and many other states have been witness to PAK terrorism. But that apart, the origin of the terror is from Pakistan, driven by the GHQ, and the entire apparatus is being funded and trained and catered for in all respects by the Pakistan Army and the ISI. The Pakistan political dispensation has hardly any role in it. Whatever comes out from the political leadership of Pakistan, it is driven by the Pakistan Army and nothing beyond that. And in the present context, when the head of the Pakistan government is now very well known that he has been sponsored, and in fact, he came to this present position only because of the army. So he has all the more little choice except to pursue the line of action as dictated to him by Pakistan Army and the ISI being part of the Pakistan Army as such. Now, what has been our response? I may echo the broadly what Mr. Pandit has said, is that we have lacked any policy on this. Any state, even if there is a small state, generally develops a policy to any problem. Leave alone the terror. If you have a problem of distress in any sector, whether it's farm sector or drought or floods or earthquake, you develop a response. And here is a big problem, which is resulting in huge losses to us. And Pakistan is actually bleeding us by 1,000 cuts. And our response has been varying from time to time, depending upon the feedback from different quarters, depending upon to an extent of appeasement policy also. The security forces, I must admit here, have generally been getting a confusing picture of how to respond to the overall situation. Though the security forces have done a wonderful job in targeting the terrorists, I mean, thousands of them have been killed. And whenever the situation arises, the losses to terrorists have been on large scale. The intelligence has been excellent as far as getting on top of the terrorists is concerned. But that is not going to solve the problem, because we are getting much more number of terrorists from across the border and by local recruitment then gets eliminated. If we look at the situation of last 5 years or so, maybe about 6-7 years in fact, I will not like to stick to, as you rightly mentioned in the beginning, that we have to be we don't have to drive our presentation by the political dispensation, whether in state or in center. But let me tell you the facts. The facts are that we had the lowest level of terrorism in 2012, where our losses of security forces were just 15, and that included the army, the paramilitary forces, that is BSF and CRPF, the police, the SPOs, and even the village defense committee members. Now, after that, the numbers have gradually risen every year from 2013 onwards. That is before the present central government also took over. And the number of incidents has been increasing. The number of losses to security forces have gone up from 15 to 82 last year. And the number of terrorists killed have also increased about fourfold. The number of incidents have increased fivefold. So we really don't try to think as to what is causing this problem. And the lack of consistency has been the biggest problem which has hampered any progress in dealing with terrorism and putting an end to it. It is only after Pulwama attack that the government has tried to show some firmness and consistency in action. But it remains to be seen how long it is going to last, whether it will be pursued to an extent whereby we target the bases of terrorists in Pakistan, and do we go on to hunt the terrorists who are still in Pakistan, especially the terrorist commanders like Hafiz Saeed or Jaish Chief Azhar Masood or Saeed Salahuddin, who is heading the Hizbul Mujahideen, who is also in Pakistan, or for that matter, Dawood Ibrahim, who has been involved in the bomb attacks also earlier in 90s. So unless we develop a response to deal with the problem holistically. Now, when I say holistically, it means we have to think of a policy which deals with Pakistan and which deals with Kashmir also to start with. Of course, we have to take care of their spread to other parts of the country also. But primarily, the most affected area at present is Kashmir, and the source of the terrorism is Pakistan. So that is another priority which we have to address. So how do we go about it? As far as Kashmir is concerned, we have to be very clear that the terrorists are to be targeted. We have to be clear on the separatists, the overground workers, the funding which is coming, the offices which these separatists are maintaining, the manpower they are employing in their offices. They have the establishments running still. They have not closed down their establishments. And it is amazing to see how Hurriyat was being allowed till last year. Only this year they have been stopped from going into Pakistan High Commission. Otherwise, they have been regularly every year going to Pakistan High Commission and seeking instructions in full view of under the nose of our establishment, highest establishment in Delhi. And they, otherwise also, not only on occasions like Pakistan National Day, but on other occasions, they had been regularly going there and meeting the Pakistan High Commissioner and other officials and their intelligence officials who are based in the Pakistan High Commission, and getting directions. Even the routing of funds is also being planned in the Pakistan High Commission in Delhi. So and then of course the things like talking to Hurriyat, the Prime Minister's meeting with the Hurriyat leaders, including Abdul Ghani Bhatt, Yasin Malik and others. Lots of things have happened in the past which have only created a mess as to what Government of India really wants and what Government of India wants to do with the problem which has been plaguing our country for the last 30 years as far as J&K terrorism is concerned. So unless we develop a consistent policy on all these factors, that's targeting terror, targeting the helpers, the separatists, the overground network, the handlers of funds in Valley, then flow of funds into the state from other parts of the world. No major effort has been done to check that. Now, when we talk of J&K police or of the security forces operating in J&K, they can't stop the flow of funds. It's not possible for them to stop funding. The funding is an oxygen it serves as an oxygen for survival of all these terrorists and the separatists who are operating there. We have not created a very strong mechanism to stop flow of funds from outside. Even some of the agencies which are dealing in receipt of funds from abroad via banking channels, and against whom charges were established in the past that they have been getting money under various code names from outside, and they are to be the funds are to be given to individuals when they come to the agency and present that code. Their agencies survived and they continue to work. They have now not been closed down. No harsh action was taken. And the general opinion as to why that was not being done was that India is a big democracy, and unless the financial transactions are very difficult to stop, and these handlers of money who get money from outside the country, they rarely know where from it is exactly coming. Whereas our intelligence, the ground level intelligence, was always that they are very well aware of it, though it is very difficult to prove in the court of law. The other point which is of importance, which has been creating a lot of obstacles in our functioning, in our way to deal with terrorism, has been the way judicial process, our response to the judicial response to this problem is concerned. You know, in a conflict zone, when the forces are very busy in dealing with lots of problems, it's not only terror, associated law and order, the separatist activities, and all sorts of things going on simultaneously. Though our investigators try to present a good case before the court, but we have usually found that on smallest error, the advantage is taken by the other side, and the judicial process comes to their rescue instantly. And whenever the cases were presented to the court for against the terrorists, with whatever little evidence is available, you can understand that in these cases the evidence collection is very difficult because no eyewitness is prepared to come and depose in the court. There are hardly any documents which can be it's not like financial trail where documents are in support of evidence which give very good clear-cut evidence against the accused. In these cases, there are hardly any documentary evidences. At the most, you may get some phone calls recorded here and there. And it is mostly, our efforts are mostly based on ballistic reports. Whenever weapon is seized, which has been used in that crime. Otherwise, the ballistic reports are also not there when a person commits a crime or killing sometime and he's arrested maybe 4 months, 5 months after. Or in most of the cases, the terrorists involved got eliminated in subsequent encounters, thereby leaving hardly anything for us to take them to the court and get a conviction. So these have been the practical difficulties. And I must say here that we need to have a very strong judicial mechanism to deal with the terror crimes also. We had some special laws enacted to deal with terror, but gradually those acts got repealed from time to time, and we have still some of the laws, but what we need is very, very strong mechanism, judicial mechanism, strong laws, and the strong judicial process by way of special courts where they can be presented. And that is one part of it. Second part of it is dealing with Pakistan. Now, you have to have a very firm policy. If you recall the latest event of Pulwama, where 40 CRPF personnel got martyred, the instant reaction of John Bolton, the NSC of USA, was that India has right to self-defense. I mean, USA will not come to us to fight our battle. They can at the most provide concurrence to our actions against our enemy. India has been generally hesitating to go across to Pakistan and punish them. In small states, small countries like Israel have been using this right of self-defense very frequently against their enemy countries and with success. we have tried to impose a self-restraint on ourselves and not responding to situations as we should. After the Bombay attack, or prior to that also, very serious incidents have taken place. There is Parliament attack on the State Assembly in J&K also. We have hardly tried to go after them. Now, after Pulwama attack, our airstrikes, I don't know whether it will be one-off, because after Udi incident, we went across for the surgical strikes. It was not followed up with anything. The whole apparatus seemed to be back to same as it was prior to the Udi incident. So I don't know whether we are going to follow it up to an extent where we can keep pressure on Pakistan. The other countries can only support us, they can sympathize with us, but we have to fight our own battle. The second thing is third point on is we have to deal with China also the way it is the best and to our advantage. My point on China is that yes.
Can you sorry to interrupt? Can you please some round up quickly, because I believe Mr. Varma has to leave. And
That's the last point. On China, China has been very friendly with Pakistan, and we have to sort out our terms with China also. India has a unfavorable trade balance with China. Last year, our imports were of $76 billion and exports were of $33 billion. The way US tried to put pressure on China, we also need to develop pressure on China. When it pinches them, they will also try to respond to their own economic needs and try to accommodate India as far as Pakistan is concerned. That's all I have to say for the time being.
thank you very much. Mr. Varma, can you please give us your comments, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry I missed out on some portions, but what I gathered was two very, very eloquent and very comprehensive presentations of the issue. And I think it couldn't have been said better. So I'm not going to repeat what they've said. I had some of these ideas in my own presentation. But let me depart a little from this, and let's come down to actually how do we meet these challenges? I think let's square it on straight away. And I think we need to look at something about ourselves. I think we need to introspect. Why are we giving space to a foreign country which is hostile to us, has been inimical to us for so many years, to be able to come and meddle? Is there something that we need to do within the house to put it in order? I think the problem to meet the challenge that is coming is really inside. We need to do something here, and that I think is a host of issues, which I must say I think this government of the day, as well as others also in the past, have tried to address. But I go along with Mr. Khoda when he says that it has been sometimes a knee-jerk reaction, sometimes an overkill, sometimes a too soft an approach. The way I look at terrorism, and that too from an intelligence perspective, I think there is no quarter to be given to a terrorist. There's no question, or these are nice things. Peace things do talk about, bringing them in and mainstreaming them. I think a man picks up a gun, he meets his fate, and that's where he should be. There is no softness that we should be doing, and there's a number of issues apart from clear military action or targeted action against these people. We are getting our forces, our frontline forces, the regulars, into a situation where you've got 1.5 hands tied behind the back, and you're asking them to face a populace which is hostile. I think it's a little unfair. We've got to devise ways and means where I feel that the local police or any other administration, or maybe some sort of dedicated forces, small groups, as the Chinese refer to as rapid reaction forces, 4 or 5 people, targeted intelligence. There is specific intelligence available. I was in the Valley 93, 95. We developed a lot of specific intelligence. We picked up a lot of people. There was no collateral damage. I mean, at least, well, as far as possible, we were able to reduce that. And once that begins to happen, I feel that the level of alienation, which really is one of the problems which the GHQ in Pakistan is feeding on and creating problems for us, could be, I won't say neutralized, but mitigated to a large extent. And we really need to see how we can remove this alienation. I have been a votary, and even then, and I still believe now, that exposing our forces, direct forces, and in the olive greens to people who are hostile, and then they fight back with non-lethal weapons like stone pelting or whatever, gives a perception to people that things are bad and we are overkilling, we are overdoing things. We need to devise a strategy. I leave it to the military people and the people there on the ground to do what they think is best. But even in terms of optics, I think we need to be a little more careful about what the world sees in us, and then they think it is. Sometimes I feel they believe it's a unfair fight. Is a country 10 times bigger than others, and we are getting needled by these little, this little urchin which goes along. Sorry to sort of use that language, but I sometimes call them that because that's what they are. This sort of throwing stones at a Rolls Royce which is going by, which has got a tremendous rate of economic development. We have so many pluses going for us. There is an amount of envy, amount of jealousy, amount of rivalry, which is definitely fueled by others. Also, they sort of like to fish in troubled waters. So I think the short point I'm trying to make is that we need to introspect. We need to see whether we're doing enough on the ground to reduce first the space for terrorists to come and meddle in our affairs. And there are a host of issues that maybe I can take it up in the Q&A, or maybe you can take it up in follow questions. But that's the first thing I would say. So consistent policy, a very clear-cut objective as to what we want to do in Kashmir. And Kashmir is just one part of this. I mean, when I look at GHQ and what they're unleashing, I think we need to address narco-terrorism. We need to address the way financing of terrorism is being done. We need to see how media is being manipulated and propagations of fake news is being done, fake currency being thrown into the country, instigation of ethnic violence, instigation of communal violence. I mean, you've got a host of things that are being used by him and exploiting a very sound democracy, but a democracy which is taking a little time to react. I think we've done very well by going in and showing them that we are not going to be cowed down by this kind of action. We will take deterrence, and I think we should have more of these. If it comes to that, of course, they have to be balanced. They've got to be carefully thought out, and they must hurt. The man itself should understand that this is not the way to go. I think part of this whole effort would also be, I think I'm a votary for dialogue. We need to keep talking. We need to keep talking to the people here. We need to be talking to people there, all hues and colors. From an intelligence perspective, I believe that the best way to do is to be able to talk to the enemy frankly and in closed doors and try and make him see reason. And the reason must be followed up. There's no question of let up and let him slip away, as you mentioned. My previous speaker just mentioned about Uri, and then we came in, and then it was almost like sounding like or looking like business as usual. That cannot be. It has to be consistent. It has to be sustained. It has to be credible, the deterrence, and it must begin to hurt them, and they must realize that this is perhaps not the alternative to take to. I'm also like to sort of point out in a bit of the asymmetric part of it. It's a low cost option for them. The industry on the same time is large. There is a lot of money to be made, so there could be vested interest which is going to creep into these kind of things. There are people who talk about the interest of keeping things as they are, just keep things in status quo, helps everybody. Everybody's in business, life goes on. But I think we are paying a huge price. We are paying too much of a price. This country just deserves much better than what we are facing. It is hampering an economic development. The movement of forces, the mobilization costs humongous amounts of money. Can't we devise different tactics to deal with these things by apart from just sheer, it's a word I use with hesitation, but muscularity. Is that really the answer to that? I recall an incident some time ago, and when I was there, and it was about somebody coming, a small kid, 10-year-old, coming in and throwing a grenade at a small mortar which had been put by the CRP or something. And we came down, we went to a search and cordon operation. It happened with 24th of December. And the whole colony was brought out onto the park, and people were searched through 4 hours. People who were pregnant, old, young, everything. We probably caught 1 or 2 people who were pointed out by a cat. But I think that day we lost about 1,000 people who just felt frustrated and annoyed and worried. So we did develop a lot of intelligence. There was a lot of it was an impelling need, and it was. And I think we need to get back to that. So a bit of bit of both, very targeted, very specific hits at the same time. Uh, you know, uh, talk to the people, talk to the guys across, and make them understand. Another point that was raised was on China. I think China would be probably happy that we are on a bit of destabilization is there, at least the valley, and things are off guard. We pose less of competition to them in their yearning to become a big power, a regional power, and then apparently a global power. We have to be very patient because it's a very tricky and a very complex country. I think another thing that I believe they have to have faith. There's a lot of things that have to happen quietly, and I think they see reason. Now, even let's talk about specifically about Azad. I just felt that fine. We've told the Chinese they stand alone today in the world. We don't have to do very much about it. I think they will themselves understand and make and do the thing that they need to. Whether we should spend so much of political capital on this and give these people a bargaining chip of sorts. I think we need to think this whole tactic and this diplomacy through too, from my personal point of view. Uh, I think we also need to look at other regions in the country. Kashmir, of course, is a burning issue today, and I think it's just really something that we have to define very clearly in terms of what our objectives are, and then go ahead and pursue it determinedly. I think we've got international support like never before in trying to tackle terrorism, and I think we stay with that. But I would look at other parts of the country also and see whether he is meddling there. He is, and what are we doing about that? And what can we do about that? I think this is something that will come only if we are able to educate the people, have uh, some security measures which actually buy in the public in their own defense, whether it's a good neighbor policy, a neighborhood watch policy, people tell us about movements, and that can only come when people understand that national security prerogative is absolutely topmost. It's nothing political. It's not. It just hits my livelihood. It makes me worried. It takes away jobs from me. It makes it an area where I'm not able to get my square meals because there is disturbance. There's a law and order situation. There's violence. There's loss of lives. Talking about loss of lives, I also want to talk about a little role of the media here, where I feel that we should not go into a lot of jingles, and we tend to overreact. We tend to bring in a lot of noise. Doesn't help anybody. It just only creates more problems. I think we should have the media probably briefed from time to time about the actual incidents, but there should be a blackout about the actual operation going on. I don't think access needs to be given to people to see what's going on in their eyes and being broadcast all over. Simultaneously, I think the area of operation, the casualties that come, the injuries that we suffer, I don't think they need to be brought out on visual media at least. It actually feeds into the terrorist's syllabus. This is exactly what he wants. He wants to sensationalize, he wants to terrorize, he wants to bring your economy to a halt and create more and more confusion. Don't we sometimes pander to it a little too much than we should? So I think that also really needs to be addressed in a very coherent and a very cogent and a forceful manner. Well thought out, of course. Uh, I also want to touch briefly on the judiciary part, which was touched by the previous speaker, and I think that also is something that we really need to look at. Are we proceeding in a way which brings about the culmination of a case to the advantage of the state when it is being wronged? I'm not talking about unfair trials. I'm talking about absolute fair trials with the principle of natural justice. Everything else which is followed, ethics has to be followed, but we need to take out guys who are anti-national. Do we need to have them running around for years together before we pronounce judgment? Now, um, I know there's a legal process. I know witnesses turn hostile. I know things, but we need to devise. After all, there are some other people who do it. So either we take him out completely, or we develop fast track processes where there is a timeline, and if the man is guilty and is proven beyond doubt, that's the end of that. I think we need to be a little more forceful. So I think there's a role for everybody. I think the economic ministries are playing a fantastic role. They're looking at Hawala financing. They're looking at all different kinds of ways, and the fake currency racket also. I think there's a lot of stemming of that there, but still a long way to go. And on a national level, I think there is definitely a need for much more cohesion, much more networking, much more connectivity between states which are affected or even in the brink of being affected. There's only a matter of time, and it shudders. You shudder to think whether there could be at some stage. We just saw the two Ks coming in together, but could it also sometime link to LWE getting into the act? Could there be? There were times in the 90s when this seemed to be a possibility. We managed to stem it. We managed to, in fact, stymie a lot of moves in that, and there were great successes. Can we look at a national security strategy? That's what I'm leading to. We've been talking about this for a very long time. Where is it? Why don't we actually work this out and implement it? I think the whole story, I think we know, I'm sure the people out there who are much better informed than I am about all the pains and the difficulties we have. I think it's time that we actually formed an institutional structure with a proper policy, a proper strategy put in place. You could always tweak a little here and there depending on which geographical region you're dealing with. But I think it's about time, it's overdue, and we nearly need to roll it out. People must know what it is, people must understand what their duties are there, they must know what the challenges are. And this education must have to start very early. I think it's not probably out of place to say that maybe when you're in your senior years of school, maybe you should get a little bit of an understanding as to what security means, what national security means, what are our challenges all over the world. It is this youth which is also, at least and when you go back to Kashmir, this is the kind of people, that's the age group they're targeting for radicalization. We need to actually stop that from happening. Maybe a private participation, a private public participation, private government participation from institutions which are known to be nationalist, are can be trusted. Could they go out and act and do something on the ground where we could help in the economic development, more jobs, more employment, health, education, restructuring, rechannelizing energy of the youth into more productive areas. I know this is probably a little, this is probably not the right time to do that because we are actually facing a real terrorist issue. But from a medium and a long-term view, I think we really need to look at this and look at many ways. Government cannot do everything. I think there is a role for the private sector. We need to do infrastructure. We need to create jobs. We need to give them skills. When you're talking about Kashmir, and we tend to just get back into it again and again. I mean, there's so many skills that reside in that populace. Can we not encourage that to happen? Education, nursing, cooking. There are so many hotels. There are so many areas that you can really look at. Even I would say games. Why not? Let's build infrastructure there. Let's have them there. Let's implement those in various places. Keep them engaged. Keep them going. Give them a hope in life. And I think we might be able to resolve a lot of issues which are challenging, and at the same time be able to, to convey to the enemy, to convey to the guys in the GSU that things here are pretty normal. You better look at your side. And why don't we go across? Why don't we actually begin to highlight in a much more forceful fashion when we use the media on developments in POK, developments in Baltistan? That also I feel is something that we need to bring up to speed. One has been following some of the developments that have been going in that area. And when you look at the China part of it also, and you look at the CPEC coming out, which is purely about, I think, it's got less to do with economy, but more to do with geostrategy. And we need to be able to take this there. The narrative must be there. There must be a defense from that side rather than us defending ourselves in the international world. We need to change the narrative completely. So that's something which I'm sure the diplomats and intelligence security setup in this country are addressing. But are we seeing enough? That's the question. And sometimes I feel there is a confusing signal. There are ups and downs, ebbs and flows in this. I think a consistent, very strong, a zero tolerance strategy, which actually hits its innards, is what we really need to do. I think we're doing a great job in at least getting diplomatic support of a nature that never happened before. We have got that. Let's build on that and let's really go after these guys. And you can't really isolate. You can't move him out of the map, but you can certainly make life difficult for them. And at the same time, reach out to the people there. We've got to be able to, in our own way. I know what I'm saying is probably very difficult in long term, but it's something worth going after. It's the deep state that is your problem, not the people. So let's take measures that do not hurt the normal people. And so there are cultural ties, there are all kinds of things, sports, and whatever. But areas of that nature, and you know, there was talk about the Indus Water Treaty, etc. Why not? Let's talk about it. Why don't we at least start preparing for these? Why should we wait for something to happen? Why don't we begin to use that treaty and use the waters at some stage or prepare for them? Build your dams, build your storage, whatever you need to do to be able to use it. I think that deterrence is the most important thing, which today I think the Pakistani establishment feels that we will not pull. I think the recent strikes probably woke them up and shook them up. Let's keep it going. Let's keep the momentum going. Let's really keep pushing him back and make him see sense. Uh, I think these are some of the ways that we need to look at to be able to really meet the challenge. But as I said, it's a problem both internal, which should be viewed from an internal dimension as well as from an external dimension. And the internal, I think we really need to keep our house in order. There is no question of pandering and mollycoddling guys who are clearly anti-national. They need to be put away where they belong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Varma. If you allow me, I will quickly, you know, issues, most of them very common, and the common theme which is emerging out of all of your presentations is clearly that, and we hear it all the time, is there is a lack of policy framework and and the consistency to follow through with their policy, which leads to the fact that there is a lack of, clearly a lack of political will. Okay, in making national security a issue of not politicizing it, but making, as you said, is educating the youth and making how important and crucial this issue is. It should not come up when an attack like Pulwama happened. National security, we should have a doctrine in terms of protecting our national interests on a consistent basis. Also, with reference to Pulwama, there is one basic fact which comes out, which is the issue of threshold. You know, we react. The consistency of policy also says that we should have a consistent cost and deterrence. We know, it's not like Pakistan suddenly wakes up and does a Pulwama once in a while. They are, like we all know, they're constantly bleeding us on different corners, not only in Kashmir. Another thing about Kashmir, I would like to say, my view is that national security, terrorism, and Kashmir should be, of course, most of the attacks, as the major theater for them is Kashmir. So most of the attacks happen in Kashmir, but on a national level, we have to understand that the threat of terrorism and the cost we incur and the consistent policy, it should not only be related to Kashmir. It should not drive from that. And Kashmir itself has its own political things, and I agree with you that we have to, we can't go in one direction. As far as Pakistan is concerned, we have to basically have a consistent policy on terrorism and state it and follow it through. It should not only be reactive. It has to be a proactive, consistent policy. Then we have to address issues on the external as well as the internal side. Coming to Bolton, Bolton basically, according to me, gave us an indication, go ahead, and that Bolton's tweet was basically an indication to India, stand up for yourself, and it indicated that they would, they would be fine with that, because they're expecting us to, right now, as we know, there are discussions going on with the Taliban, and the Pakistani ambassador in Kabul, if you most of you must have seen, came up with a statement after Pulwama that if India retaliates, it will affect the Taliban talks, which clearly shows, without saying too many words, their whole nexus with the terror network. So we all know that. We don't have to prove that to the world. Another issue which comes up is coming back to Mr. Pandit's remark on jihad. Terrorism today, we had this terminology of good and bad terrorist, and I remember long back there was, in Kashmir especially, there was this issue: is somebody's freedom fighter, is somebody's terrorist? Okay, those days are gone, because today everyone understands anywhere in the world what terrorism is, right from New Zealand to Europe to our part of the world, everywhere. So what India is still not doing is, my view in all of our discussions, the summary is that you need to understand the strategic issue, have a consistent policy, and the political and on the political level and on the governance level, have a very consistent policy to address that, and not only, not make it a emotional political issue whenever there is a threshold, and we one incident happens and we all go. So the cost and deterrence for Pakistan should be very clearly stated, and that should stay consistently in force. It should not, be hot and cold. Okay, so I think that is my view, and you guys are more than welcome to. I can start with one of you, or Mr. Pandit. Would you like to start? Mr. Pandit?
Can you hear me?
I think.
Can you hear me? Okay, I would like to respond to a few points that have been made, including yours. You had some discomfort about calling it jihad, and because it identifies the entire problem or challenge of terror with a particular identity. I think that is also part of the problem. Being squeamish about naming what it is, because it would, use a broad brush to engulf a community, and therefore play it down or call it by some other name, is part of the problem. If the name is Lashkar-e-Tayyiba, if the name is Jaish-e-Muhammad, if the name is Hizbul Mujahideen, if they are coordinated by a body called United Jihad Council, and if United Jihad Council is being run by the state of Pakistan, which was formed on the basis of a certain religious doctrine and religion as its primary identity, then sorry, it is jihad. They call it jihad themselves. When we were thrown out of Kashmir, though use of names like Azadi, words like Azadi were in popular vogue, but you didn't even have to scratch the surface to know. The slogan said it all. Azadi ka matlab kya? La ilaha illallah. Yahan kya chalega? Nizam-e Mustafa. And if you still have doubts, you only have to go through the video of Pulwama suicide bomber and figure out as to what he is doing all this for. So it is jihad. But I take your point that there is terror-related violence from non-jihadi sources also. And you named Christchurch shootings. Now, I would like to ask you, did Christchurch shooting come from an established organization espousing a certain ideology? Did they ascribe it to a certain philosophy? Or was it a lone wolf attack and a hate crime, which is more as a reaction? So, for example, we have another problem in our tribal corridor. We call it left extremism. That left extremism is called so because the ideology they espouse is what we call Maoist or Marxist. And we correctly identify them as that. because we need to know as to where are they getting this inspiration from. How do they guide this effort? What objectives do they have when they indulge in this? So if we call it something else, we call it azadi, we call it alienation, we call it war, we call it third or fifth generation asymmetric conflict, we are actually trying to give it nomenclature which is politically correct, even if it is factually wrong. So we have to start addressing it for what it is. It is jihad. Those who wage it against us call it jihad. It has inspirations from jihad. It waves the flag in our face, which has those jihadic um, the injunction, the inspiration. So calling it by another name is actually burying our head in sand, which should be avoided. That's number one. Number two, I completely agree with the case that this is not Pakistan alone. Pakistan, of course, may have been the originator of this, but now jihad has found a fully fledged infrastructure within. Its funding sources are also within. Its instigators are within. Its foot soldiers are within. Its fidaeens are within. Its political backers are within. And this is now supported very much from our soil. So I would like to call it the Pakistan within. It's the Pakistan on the border. This Pakistan within is in our academia. You go to the University of Kashmir, you go to a college and school institutions, you talk to teachers. Burhan Wani's father was a retired headmaster. If this is what he did to his son, imagine what he must have done to generations of students he taught. And this all began when Sheikh banned Jamaati institutions when he came as chief minister in 1974. But the blunder he made was incorporating the teachers and students in the state apparatus of schools. So therefore, you actually brought in the virus into the system of education. And then you had teachers attacking the faculty of universities and colleges. So there is a thriving Pakistan within in our academia. There is a Pakistan within in our media. You have only to read the newspapers that come out from Kashmir and read columns and columns of write-ups that happen in our mainstream media that would point fingers at everything except Pakistan and jihad. There is a Pakistan in our economy. There is a Pakistan in our NGOs.
Sorry,
There is a Pakistan.
sir, Mr. Pandit, can you wrap up, because Mr. Zafar has joined us and we are running short on time.
I will. Yes, I
Thank
will.
you.
I will. There is a Pakistan in our civil society, and we haven't even begun to address the Pakistan within, which is now sustaining this jihad. Of course, I would be failing in my duty if I don't say that there is Pakistan in our body politic, our political system that sustains it, that rationalizes and supports it, that intervenes in the crucial times in order to offer it cushion, in order to tweak the state policy which is trying to defend itself against this jihad. So in our bureaucracy, within, I dare say with due apologies, within our police system, there exists a Pakistan that lurks in the shadows. So we need to be wary of that. This virus has seeped very, very deep because we've allowed it to. Our political dispensations have played footsie with it, played hide and seek with it, actually very often supped with it, made huge concessions, created a symbiotic relationship with it. Can you imagine? JKLF wasn't banned till few days back. Hurriyat is still not banned. Jamiyat-e-Tulba is not banned. Ahle-Hadith is not banned. You pick up individuals like Mushtaq Viri, but you do not smash their infrastructure. Jamiyat institutions are still thriving, their schools, their colleges are still running. So you have barely scratched the surface. You seem to be reluctant going the whole hog. And I rest my case here because you're getting impatient. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I think quickly, Mr. Pandit, I don't disagree with you on the issue of jihad, but the larger issue of terrorism. Please understand. I'll take 1 minute. Okay, the jihad factories, which we unfortunately blame one sector community, were built at the behest of Zia ul Haq and CIA before they came to Kashmir. So that was part of an war which termed it, right? And I think it is a very sensitive policy to target one community for, and also when you gave the reference, I don't disagree with all the organizations you talk. So let's talk about the population quickly. I'll end this. The amount of population, we just said it's all the people of Pakistan are not like that, right? There are certain vested interests in their power structure which create this narrative and influence
But I
this.
didn't say that. I didn't blame the entire community. I didn't blame the entire population of Pakistan, but that doesn't mean it is not jihad. In fact, Muslims, in fact, academics,
No,
Muslim academics, Muslim journalists are willing to concede that this is jihad.
not all Muslims. Not all
That's the
Muslims.
challenge. You need to get them to acknowledge that this is nothing but jihad. You identify cancer as some kind of a headache, you're running into problems.
Separate discussions. I will agree. I will invite now Mr. Zafar to give his presentation and comments. He just joined us. Zafar Saab, welcome to the webinar. And we all have spoken, and I think we are running short of time. So I would want you to be as brief as you can. Thank you very much.
See, I'll tell you one thing, and I'll continue from where you left. That to blame the whole Pakistan population would be we are playing into hands of the Pakistan establishment. There is a large, and you are neighbor to Pakistan, you are in Afghanistan, you must be knowing. And I would again bring that there was nothing like jihadi movement ever. I mean, this is import of MI5 and CIA because they wanted to defeat Russia. So they created this kind of madrasas. I mean, all my life, I never ever knew that this kind of mindset ever exists. I mean, we didn't even know about it. My introduction to these kind of ideology was first time when I went to UK in the early 90s. Till then, we didn't even know. But there are enough Pakistanis. I mean, the moment we talk of Pakistan, only two names comes in our mind. Masood Azhar and Hafiz Saeed. I mean, I had rejected Masood Azhar in 94. I met him in England. He was just one of those Katha Vachaks you have. He was one of those. And I thought that he is absolutely nothing. In fact, I sent a message to him also where a madrasa where he was studying of Darul Karachi. So you have to separate. I mean, if you take that the whole Pakistan population, then we are totally getting into the hands of the people. There is a large silent majority within the Islamic scholars in Pakistan who we meet day in and day out. So you have to differentiate between the ISI, the Pakistan army, and the large section of Islamic clerics in Pakistan. Unless we don't do that, and we paint every Muslim with the brush of the so-called jihadi. I mean, for me, I don't for a moment call them jihadis, I call them fasadis. Actually, by calling them jihadi, you are giving them a recognition. Jihad is mentioned 41 times in Quran, and it never remotely talks about killing any people. So actually, they should be termed as fasadis. So till, and now last, because I came very late, and I would address this to Mr. Pandit also, Sushil Pandit Saab, that we also need to address the ideology. The ideology which emanates, we need to defeat that ideology also. And that also needs to separately be done. Unless we don't do that, because we need to tell the people that the ideology which is being exported in the name of jihad is actually not going to take you to Jannat, it will take you to Jahannam. So this also parallel to all the effort also needs to be done. This is my limited observation and my contribution to it.
Uh, Aditya, I think I can't figure that out because my internet is weak. So if you can kindly, frame the questions, please. Let me see let
Yeah.
me 1 minute.
So we have question from Sanjeev Tripathi. Should we not be more proactive about our claim over POK and GB, which are under illegal occupation of Pakistan?
I think I raised this point in my address. I think we really need to take this problem to them. We need to be able to shift the entire narrative for them to defend rather than to come and pin pick here. They have less than a case for what they have done in terms of atrocities, in terms of engrandizement, in terms of annexation, alleged or this thing, and that perception has to be given to the people, and we need to be able to cause them the kind of I would say pain of not they should be deterred from raising issues which are infructuous as far as we are concerned. We need to take this whole narrative into their country, and the people are the ones they need to be addressed. I think we can give them moral support. There is diplomatic support. We talked about it 3-4 years ago. I don't see that happening anymore. We see a little bit of softening. I think that needs to be brought back into the main theme of dealing with Pakistan.
If I'm allowed to
Any
add,
other?
I think can I just add quickly? We also look at if we say terrorism, we are the topic of discussion is challenges of terrorism uh, propagated by or supported by GHQ. It is affecting other countries like Iran and Afghanistan, and we need to form a consensus and look at issues which they face, including the Durand Line and the PTM, which are issues which actually put them on a back foot in terms of other people affected by terrorism following a coalition against terrorism in the region. Thank you.
I think it really comes
Fine.
back, if I may just intervene for just 10 seconds, really brings us back into actually having a coherent policy to deal with this, whether it's a consensus of similarly placed countries in the neighborhood or people, rogue, how to deal with rogue elements, whether it is putting pressure on them to deal with them domestically or from an international organization or institutions that come into play. I think this pressure has to be coordinated. It has to come in at the right time. The timing has to be correct, and it has to be sustained. And then we could not allow them to go away by playing either, becoming a nuisance by, talking about threats about nuclear weapons and this, that, and the other. I think that bluff has to be called. And the earlier we called it, and I think we did. We really managed to do this post Pulwama. I think that bluff was reasonably called. I just felt that maybe we just missed an opportunity. I don't want to sort of criticize the thing. It takes a lot of meticulous planning and to be able to do what we'd managed to do. But perhaps we could have taken out a few more camps while we were at it. You don't get a second chance for a long time to come. Make him feel hurt and actually just go for the terrorists. Take them out. We don't want collateral damage. So I think it was a super operation. But perhaps we could have gone a couple of steps more and taken out some of the other places and some of the top targets.
Aditya, I'll just make a brief point. I mean, of course, the military options and all that, there are a lot of experts talking on that. And of course, that should be done. Whatever, I mean, it needs to be done the way, Balakot strike or whatever. But parallel to that, we should also create and start a dialogue within people in Pakistan. There are enough people. I mean, they are also so in more ways than others, they are perturbed by things happening. So why don't we build relationships with those kind of people parallel to that? I mean, whatever the government is doing, the military or the armed forces, that has to be there. But this effort also needs to be done. Build bridges with such people who think living in Pakistan that Masood Azhars of the world and Hafiz Saids are dangerous for their future. There are enough people there. So why not we build up a relationship or a process of dialogue, whatever it may be. But that also is very important thing.
May
Mr. Pandit, please.
Yes, thank you. You see, there was a question on Pakistan occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. And what Ms. Varma said very rightly, that we must take the battle to those areas. I feel it is easier said than done. And I'll give you the reason. We don't have the political stomach for it. Pakistan is going to pieces in order to claim the Kashmir that belongs to us. We have not invested a dime till date, except passing a resolution in the parliament in 1994. We have done nothing about it. And we don't even want to talk about it. When there was a conflict in Kargil in 99, we had forbidden our air force from crossing the LOC. We still make a big issue of crossing the LOC. We treat it more sacrosanct than Pakistan does. We seem to have in our minds conceded it, and we are waiting for Pakistan to give us this huge favor by turning it into an international boundary. We have already in our mind conceded it for peace with Pakistan. So you are talking to a political class. You are talking to an entire establishment that has in its mind conceded Pakistan occupied Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan, and is waiting for Pakistan to accept it as international border, to go and invest in taking it back. For that, we need to completely reorient ourselves. We are also right now talking about it in terms of responding, in terms of shifting the pressure. We are not committed. We do not have the conviction and the courage to actually seriously go look at it as Indian territory and take it back. We are using it only as a bargaining chip. We are using it as part of tactical response in order to shift pressure. We are only using it as some kind of a grand give and take for an abiding peace. So to expect my political leadership, my establishment here, even in intelligentsia and civil society, is a huge task. And I don't think it's it's going to happen in the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Mr. Pandit. Mr. Khoda, would you like to add something?
Yeah, on 2 or 3 points. Let me talk about POK and Gilgit-Baltistan. I would add to what Mr. Varma and Mr. Pandit has said. Do we have the means to create trouble there? Do we have the means to foment trouble there? We require lots of wherewithal, the prerequisites for that. You have to have population which is amenable to our view on creating trouble for Pakistan. And of course, if we want to really create a lot of trouble there, then we have to think in terms of for not only facilitating the people there into creating problem for Pakistan, but actually supporting them in all ways the way Pakistan is supporting terrorism in Kashmir. But for India, I don't think it will be feasible to develop that image internationally that we are supporting terror for all practical purposes. POK is with Pakistan. It is at least administered by Pakistan. The way Pakistan is trying to claim Kashmir, we are also trying to claim the POK and Gilgit-Baltistan. And the way Pakistan is being accused internationally of creating terror in Kashmir, we will also fall in the same category. Do we want to compete with Pakistan on that? We have the means to create problem. in POK and Gilgit-Baltistan? My assessment is no. Already we have lots of problems here. We are not able to deal with them. I don't see, even if we want to create problems here, can we afford to do it, or do we have the means and do we have the means to do it? The second thing is about the proxy war, which Mr. Pandit mentioned in his initial remarks. Yes, I would take it slightly further. We have lost over 5,000 security force personnel so far in Kashmir, in J&K, while dealing with terror. It is much more than the losses we have suffered in any other war which India has fought after independence. So it is in terms of costs, it is India is paying heavily, and it is high time that we need to have a consistent policy. As Sam has said, we need to have a consistent policy which should be followed to the hilt, irrespective of the type of government, irrespective of the political parties in power. Some amendments from time to time, strategic changes can be done depending upon the situation, but on the whole, we have to have a very consistent policy. On the dialogue thing, yes, dialogue, ultimately we have to finish off the thing with dialogue, but dialogue has to be from a position of strength. It can't be in the present situation where Pakistan is openly supporting terror and it's successfully doing so. And our policy against Pakistan has to be militarily, as rightly said mentioned by you. The economic, diplomatic pressure has to be built and taken forward. And as Zafar has also mentioned, that social pressure within Pakistan needs to be developed. No, but as far as people-to-people contact between India and Pakistan is concerned, it has not worked in the past. We have seen that how this people-to-people contact had got misused into creating a lobby within India, whereby India was made to feel that the policy of restraint is always better, which obviously has never helped India. The policy of restraint has always worked against it. India has to show to Pakistan and to the world community that we are a strong nation, and that has to be displayed as has been done in the recent air strikes. But that, whether it will be followed, as I mentioned earlier, it has to be seen. About J&K police, I want to react on the point which Mr. Pandit has mentioned. Let me tell you, out of over 5,000 casualties, nearly 1,800 casualties are of J&K police. And they are the boys whose families are there. And it is not only that they have been killed in isolated incidents, they actually sacrificed themselves in encounters. The other point is that, which I again tell you from my being part of dealing with terror for all this, right from 1989 onwards, is that about 90% of the intelligence leading to successful operations, leading to deaths of the terrorists, killing of the terrorists, has been coming from J&K police and from those local boys who are in the field. So if there are some elements within the police or within any other establishment, for that matter, you have seen the killing of this fellow who was in Shopaya, who in that case, that army man who was killed from Mender. The name is slipping from my mind right now. In that case also, 2 other army men from within the same unit were found to be guilty of passing on the information to militants. So we cannot say that the entire army is Aurangzeb, exactly, yes, Aurangzeb. So the information was leaked from the army by other 2 local army guys. Such elements you will find in any organization. But let me mention here and place it on record that J&K police has done outstanding work. Despite being locals, their families are there. They are under threat and they have been killed because they belong to J&K police. They have stood up to the challenges, and the operations which are going there, which are leading to successes, have primarily been outcome of the intelligence provided by the local boys. And I am part of it. I have been witness to it, not only witness, I have seen how effective they are. They are doing their duty, but yes, of course, odd elements have always been there in anywhere you can find. And the other point is about action versus propaganda. So one of the speakers mentioned propaganda coming on the channels and other things and displaying valor on the channels is not going to lead to much on, at least as far as the government is concerned, that from the government spokesman, we have to be action oriented. Our actions should speak for us rather than our broadcasts of our intentions to deal with Pakistan. A small country like Sri Lanka has shown us how to eliminate terror. And and they have, when Indian peacekeeping force was acting with a lot of restraint in Sri Lanka, they were told by them to please wind up and go back to India. We'll deal with the problem ourselves, and they did it. They have shown it to us, and we need to learn something from that. And the last point mine is about the judiciary. I want to just elaborate a bit. It needs a serious thinking. We have seen that in view of the difficulties being faced in prosecuting the criminals, though I already mentioned that most of these people who are involved in various crimes got eliminated in a short period of time, but still some of them like Yasin Malik or Bita Karate and few more are still there who are admitted openly to the killings of minorities and other people also, IAF personnel also for that matter. We have seen judiciary not really helping us out in this situation which you are facing. And as happens in any establishment, whether it is political establishment, whether it is the security forces, and it holds true for judiciary also, the person sitting in the chair matters a lot. And in case we have the local judges dealing with these problems, they have their own compulsions, they stay there, their families are there, their relations are there, the local pressures are there on them. So we need to have a separate judicial wing for dealing with terrorist crime, whereby the local judicial officers may not be involved. It has to be judicial officers from outside the state, and who can, and the people who are known for standing up to the integrity of the country, who have an element of dealing with a lot of professionalism and enthusiasm also, I should say, to deal with the security threats of the country. They should be there. I have seen the public PSA warrants, how they were trashed by the judiciary on very, very small points. They have huge evidence against a person against whom PSA had been slapped, but for one small, some inconsequential lacuna, the PSA warrant is rejected straightway, ignoring all other evidence. So as long as these sorts of things keep on happening in the judiciary also, I'm afraid that we'll not be able to rein in the people like Gilani and other Hurriyat leaders and the separatists and the organized workers to whom generally this is applied. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know. I'm not sure how much time we have, but if any of you want some concluding remarks, I think I will quickly make the point. There are internal dimensions and external dimensions, and although when we talk about terrorism in India, Kashmir becomes one of the most affected areas and is part of the national discourse. But again, the politics behind it is one of the major. I believe, besides the systematic deficiencies in enforcing law and order, I think there's a serious issue on the political will on changing the paradigm as far as Pakistan is concerned. We need a consistent, concerted effort and policy, and we need to follow. That when we say that there will be no tolerance for terrorism, we actually need to put it in practice. Mr. Varma, I can start with you for your concluding remarks, please.
Well, I think you have summarized it already, but let me sort of go back into this and suggest that I think let's start. The whole problem is with the strategy, the counter strategy to actually neutralize what the Pakistanis have in mind, what the GHQ has in mind. And I think I would begin by more looking at the internal dimension. I think we need to keep an house in order. People flow in. It's like water getting into a damaged building. It'll find a place. We need to strengthen our own administrative controls, our security controls, and this is a host of things that have to come in, which is also a healing touch. It also means weaning people away from the alienation that they've already got into. And I'm not specifically talking only about Kashmir, but to bring it into a national level. So I think that's what the debate is. In the Pakistani sponsored terrorism or terrorism has got much larger dimension than just Kashmir.
हाँ तो पहले एक बार फोन कर लेना.
We really need to look at all the other pitfalls, other areas that they're looking
9
into, whether it's
बजे
into fake currency
9 बजे कर
writing,
लेना तुरंत.
whether they're talking about communal tensions, whether they're talking about disputes, whether they are they're fishing into all kinds of troubled waters. We really need to have a coherent, consistent, credible, and a policy which has to be implemented over a time frame. It's not an easy solution. We've been facing this scourge of terrorism, cross-border terrorism, for years, for a large number of years, at a huge cost to our life and threat to our territorial sovereignty. I think as a country which is self-confident, proud, and coming up into a power play which it deserves in the world mosaic, I think we need to show determination, strength, and a capability of deterrence. I want to briefly also go back to what had been said by another speaker about the POK and how difficult it can be to be actually do it. I'm not talking about military interventions. I'm just talking about perception management. You need to have people believe what is happening on that side. We claim it as ours, but we really don't walk the talk, if I may use a cliche. I think we really need to highlight those issues and let them do it, sort it out themselves. I'm not talking about creating terrorist activities there or entering their country and doing this. India will never do it. India has a defensive doctrine. And I think this is something that some of the neighbors who are hostile to us have taken advantage of. They know that you will never transgress the line. You will never go beyond. We may still not do it. We may only do it in the form of causing them pain when they hurt us in the way they did in Pulwama or they did in Puri. But we must be able to convey to them that if push comes to shove, there is a very serious consequence that they may have to pay for in case they cross the line. I think that is what we really need to do, and we also need to be mindful of others who might be fishing in this troubled water. We need to be able to strengthen our relations with them too at the same time. So I think it's got to be a mix of the internal as well as an external dimension, and we need to be somewhat offensive. And I don't accept the fact that we've been too soft. I don't think so. I think government of the day has really shown that if you want to do it, you can do it. It all needs is meticulous planning. It needs political will, no doubt about it. But also shows that you can capable of doing something and coming away unhurt in that sense of the word, which should be a huge boost to us and actually should demoralize the Pakistanis to a large extent. Let's build on that. Let's continue to move in that direction and gain momentum of doing this as well as diplomatically, globally, which I think we are doing reasonably well, in fact, very well. We are able to carry this and sustain it. It's not a one-off. And there will be more coalitions coming in with them. There will be people, if the Americans move out of Afghanistan, if Iraq is sorted out today, they're talking about the ISIS having been neutralized, caliphates have been destroyed. Where do those fighters go? I can't see any other area but this. So we need to be able to build a second line of defense because there will be trouble. They will foment trouble again and again. I don't think this neighborhood is very comfortable with such a huge power with the potential of actually assuming trans-regional profile. So we will have difficulties, but we really need to strengthen our internal structure, and I think we are doing a pretty good job. But I hope we are more consistent, more credible, and we stay on holding the hands of people who are with us all through. There's no question of giving up, or no question of ebbs and flows in this kind of a policy. We need to have a national security strategy in place. It must address these issues. And after a due debate, I think we need to actually roll it out and let people know within the country and outside what is required of everybody, every human being, every citizen of this country, what is actually required. And simultaneously, those who are on the other side, there has to be zero tolerance. I don't think I'm reiterating, I'm belaboring this point. You cannot allow a person to hurt you and go away scot-free. Doesn't matter whatever he is, whoever he is. If he's anti-national, you must take him out. That's the way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varma.
Hello. I couldn't hear you.
Mr. Pandit.
Yes, may I? Thank you. I was listening very carefully to Mr. Varma. Mr. Varma very rightly said we must have a policy. May I seek his indulgence to mention
You're
we need two things before. Yes, I'm concluding. We need two things before we need a policy. First, we need a very, very clear-cut definition of the problem. We have to identify the problem in no uncertain terms, number one. Number two, we need to define our objectives, having identified the problem. Three, flows from it the policy. Now, he was quite comfortable with the decisiveness of this government and its ability or its will to follow a policy. I'll just give you one example. Day before, it congratulated the nation called Pakistan on its National Day. No less than a letter was sent to the Prime Minister, and we decided to boycott their function in the embassy. Two completely inconsistent steps. And then we had an amazing spectacle of our intelligence bureau officers standing outside the High Commission, politely trying to tell the guests that Indian government is boycotting the function. We leave it to your conscience whether to go in or not. I think it was utterly ham-handed. One hand did not know what the other hand was up to. And we created an embarrassing situation, and the Prime Minister of Pakistan used that letter to mock at us through a tweet. So we need to know who we are dealing with, what our objectives are, and then the policy that we identify needs to be consistent. It has to be in sync with every step we take. We are a far cry from it. Our limbs are still completely incoherent in even espousing a policy, forget trying to implement it cogently. So I frankly might sound a little disappointed and not too optimistic, but that is the case because we need to know where we need to address our issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pandit. Mr. Khoda, your concluding remarks, please.
No, the last point, that's about, I pick up from what Mr. Varma has said, that we need to address the other dimension of the problem also, that is the youth of the state. We have to drive the youth of the state in a direction which suits us, and a huge effort is required to be made in that direction. We have to drive them in a manner so that they develop vested interest in being citizens of India than thinking of being with Pakistan or being independent. And that can be done through one of the time-tested measures, that is developing economic interest of the youth of Kashmir in India. So for that, you have to work really hard in a very consistent manner. And some initiatives have been taken in the past, but unfortunately they got discontinued. You have to have, we had framed a policy in 2010 in consultation with the Government of India, whereby we requested some of the private sector people also to come to Kashmir and recruit the engineers and others from universities, from colleges, and from other skill development institutions like ITI and others, Polytechnic. On their merit, not to show any concession. Only you take them on jobs in private sector, depending on the merit, and we don't want any reservation. The counter question was that they should apply for the vacancies all over India. Unfortunately, in Kashmir, the youth don't tend to move out and search for jobs. It will be, and I told them that it will be possible if the private players come and they come to the campuses and recruit, and once they get the appointment letter or job, they will move out, and that started happening. But the drive was half-hearted. It was not followed up to its logical conclusion. The effort should have increased with every passing month or year. That did not happen. Unless you do, and likewise it can happen in business sectors, in education sectors, and many other areas whereby a person, a Kashmiri who is staying in any other part of the country and who has his economic roots deeply entrenched there, will 10 times think before consenting his other family members or other relations living in Kashmir, that they should go for separation from India. We have to work on that also. Militarily or diplomatically or any other issue dealing with Pakistan is one thing, but we have to address the concerns in Kashmir also, so that we try to bring youth into the mainstream by developing a huge economic interest of theirs in the rest of the country, in all sectors, not only in education, but services, business, transport, all other sectors. We have to. That's a huge effort which is required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was really really considering after Pulwama, there is a lot of emotion, and I respect Mr. Pandit's emotion. But I think besides the emotion and the we need to go past emotions, and we need to have a very objective approach to. I understand the roots and I understand where that emotion emerges from, but as a nation, we need a very sustained, proactive approach to the threat of terrorism, and it's not going to go away very soon, unfortunately. So we need to prepare for the threat, and we need to counter Pakistan and take increase the cost and deterrence to them, so that only that consistent policy will act with different levels, and implementing that policy also consistently will sort of in some ways address the challenge. Thank you very much, gentlemen.